Rex nearly took my hand off when I tried to toss that beaten-up box into the dumpster. My police-trained German Shepherd, whose face-down armed suspects without flinching, just snarled at me, his handler of 7 years. When we finally opened that box together, what we found inside changed everything I thought I knew about loyalty, memory, and the invisible threads that connect our lives. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The basement flood was the final straw. After 3 days of torrential April rain, the ancient drainage system in my 1940s bungalow had finally surrendered, leaving 4 inches of murky water covering everything I'd carelessly stored on the concrete floor. The water had receded, but the damage remained. Soggy cardboard, warped photo frames, and the unmistakable musty scent of regret. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, industrial-strength garbage bags in hand, surveying the aftermath. My police department hoodie was already damp with sweat, despite the basement's chill. The cleanup couldn't wait any longer. I'd already postponed it through 2 straight weekends of emergency shifts. What do you think, Rex? Should we just torch the place and start over? I glanced at my partner, both on the force and at home. The imposing German Shepherd sat at attention at the base of the stairs, his dark eyes alert despite his relaxed posture. 7 years as a K9 officer had trained him to remain vigilant even during downtime. He gave a soft huff that I chose to interpret as solidarity. Rex had been with me through everything: the divorce, the department commendations, the night I took a knife to the shoulder during a domestic violence call. He was more than a police dog. He was the most consistent relationship in my life. Some officers struggled with the transition when their K9 partners moved in permanently after retirement. Not me. Rex's retirement 3 months ago had been seamless, as if we'd been waiting years for the chance to drop the formalities and just be family. I started with the obvious casualties: cardboard boxes disintegrating into mush, their contents spilled and ruined. Most contained police academy textbooks, training manuals, and case files I'd held onto out of some misplaced sense of duty. None of it mattered now, transformed by water into indistinguishable pulp. "Don't judge me for the hoarding, buddy," I said, as Rex watched me from his dry perch on the 3rd stair. "Not all of us have your minimalist lifestyle. Food, tennis balls, belly rubs. That's all you need, right?" Rex's ears perked up at tennis balls, and I laughed despite the mess. Simple pleasures. Maybe he had it figured out after all. The corner of the basement had remained relatively dry, protected by a slight elevation in the foundation that had served as nature's last defense. There, stacked in a haphazard tower, were boxes I hadn't seen in years. Possessions that had followed me through 3 moves, but hadn't been important enough to unpack. One box caught my eye. Unlike the others, it wasn't labeled with my hasty Sharpie scrawl. It was plain brown cardboard, medium-sized, sealed with what looked like military grade. Packing tape turned yellow with age. No markings, no shipping labels, nothing to indicate its contents or origin. It seemed untouched by the flood, perched on top of a plastic storage bin that had protected it from the water. "Where did you come from?" I murmured, pulling it down. The box was surprisingly heavy, with something shifting inside as I moved it. I placed it on a relatively dry workbench and ran my hand over the top, feeling the dust that had accumulated over. How many years? That's when I noticed Rex. He'd abandoned his position on the stairs and was suddenly beside me, body tense, eyes fixed on the box. His posture had changed completely. Head forward, ears erect, tail straight. I recognized this stance from our years working together. This was his alert position, the unmistakable signal that he'd detected something significant. "What is it? Boy, you smell something," I asked, automatically shifting into handler mode. Was there something dangerous inside? Drugs? Explosives? Even in retirement, Rex's training remained impeccable. If there was contraband in that box, he'd know. But this wasn't his narcotics alert or his explosives response. This was something different, more personal, almost protective. He stepped between me and the box, his body blocking my access to it. "Rex, move!" I commanded, using our working tone. He didn't budge. 7 years of flawless obedience, and suddenly my partner was ignoring a direct order. I reached around him for the box, planning to move it to a better light where I could examine it properly. "That's when it happened," Rex growled. Not the performative warning we used in training, but a deep, rumbling sound that started in his chest and built to a bare-toothed snarl. When I didn't immediately back away, he snapped at the air near my hand, a calculated warning that came within inches of my skin. I jerked back, more from surprise than fear. "Rex, stand down!" My voice echoed against the concrete walls, sharp with authority and disbelief. He held his ground, a low growl still vibrating in his throat, his eyes never leaving the box. In 7 years of partnership through drug busts, building searches, and standoffs with armed suspects, Rex had never once turned that growl on me. This was the dog who'd once positioned himself between me and a suspect with a concealed weapon, who'd taken a kick to the ribs without retreating from his protective stance. Now he was using that same protective instinct against me, or rather, to protect this unremarkable box from me. I stood back, heart pounding with confusion more than fear. "What the hell, Rex?" That's when I called my former K9 sergeant, Michael. Jen, after 22 years with the K9 unit, Michael had seen it all. If anyone could explain this behavior, it would be him. "He did what?" Michael's voice was thick with sleep. It was only after dialing that I'd realized it was barely 6 a.m. on his day off. "He growled at me, Mike. Actually bared his teeth when I tried to move this box." I kept my distance from both Rex and the mysterious package as I spoke. Rex had settled into a sphinx position, front paws extended, body between me and the object he'd appointed himself to guard. The growling had stopped, but the message remained clear. The box was under his protection. Is he showing any other unusual behaviors, disorientation, aggression toward other objects? Michael was fully awake now, professional concern evident in his voice. "No, nothing. He's completely normal except for this. Fixation." I watched as Rex's eyes tracked my movement. He wasn't aggressive, just resolute. "What kind of box are we talking about? Anything special about it?" "That's just it. It's completely ordinary, old cardboard, no markings. I don't even remember where it came from or what's in it." There was a thoughtful pause on the line. "But Rex seems to know." "Yeah," I agreed, the realization settling over me. He definitely knows something I don't. Dogs don't guard objects without reason. Connor, especially not trained canines. If Rex is protecting that box, there's something significant about it, something he recognizes. "But how? I don't even recognize it." Michael chuckled softly. "Their memory works differently than ours. Scent is tied directly to their emotional centers. Something in or on that box is triggering a powerful memory for him." I studied the ordinary cardboard container with new curiosity. "So what do? I can't exactly leave it there forever underarmed." "Guard! Don't force the issue. He's not being aggressive, he's being protective. Sit with him. Show him you're not a threat to whatever he's guarding. Let him understand you want to investigate it together." It sounded like New Age dog psychology, but Michael had never steered me wrong when it came to K9 behavior. "All right, I'll try." After hanging up, I approached the standoff with a new strategy. Instead of reaching for the box, I slowly sat on the floor about 6 feet away, deliberately non-threatening. "Okay, partner," I said quietly, using the familiar tone I'd always used during our calmer moments on duty. "I don't know what's so special about this box, but it clearly matters to you. I'm not going to throw it away. I just want to see what's inside. Can we do that together?" Rex's posture remained alert, but the tension in his body eased slightly. I stayed there for nearly 20 minutes, just talking to him in a steady voice, reminiscing about some of our memorable cases. The time he'd found a missing child by tracking her through a rainstorm, the drug bust that had earned him a special commendation from the commissioner. Gradually, his guard position relaxed, though his eyes remained fixed on the box. "I'm going to come a little closer now," I narrated, shifting forward a few inches. Rex watched but didn't react negatively. Progress. It took another 15 minutes of this slow approach before I was sitting beside him, close enough to touch the box but deliberately not reaching for it. Instead, I placed my hand gently on Rex's back, feeling the solid warmth of him. "Whatever's in there matters to you, so it matters to me," I told him. "But we need to open it to understand, okay?" As if he comprehended every word, Rex shifted his position, moving aside just enough to grant me access while remaining close enough to observe. The change in his demeanor was remarkable, from fierce guardian to curious participant. With slow, deliberate movements, I pulled the box toward us. Up close, I could see that the tape sealing it had been applied with unusual care, each strip precisely overlapping the next. This wasn't a hasty packing job. Whoever had sealed this box had wanted its contents thoroughly protected. "Here goes nothing," I murmured, pulling out my pocket knife. The tape surrendered with a dull, ripping sound. Rex's ears twitched at each tear, but he remained calm, his eyes tracking my every movement. When the last strip gave way, I hesitated, suddenly apprehensive about what we might discover. What could possibly be in this nondescript container that would trigger such a powerful protective response from my K9 partner? Drugs seemed unlikely. Rex would have given his specific narcotic alert. Same for explosives or weapons. This was something else, something that resonated with him on a deeper level. I lifted the flaps to reveal the contents and immediately understood why this box had been so carefully sealed. Inside, protected by layers of bubble wrap, was a collection of items that stopped my breath. On top lay a weather-beaten leather K9 harness, not the modern tactical vest Rex had worn on duty, but an older model, the leather softened with age and use. Patches indicated it had belonged to the department's K9 unit, but the name stitched on the side wasn't Rex's. "Atlas," I read aloud, the name unfamiliar to me. Rex's reaction was immediate. His ears perked forward, and he made a soft whining sound I'd never heard from him before, something between recognition and longing. Beneath the harness lay a carefully folded thermal blanket, the silver material dulled with age, but still intact. Next to it, sealed in a plastic bag, was a frayed rope toy, its blue and white fibers unraveling at the ends, evidence of determined tugging. Did these belong to another dog?" I asked, though I knew Rex couldn't answer. Still, his intense focus on the items suggested a connection I couldn't yet understand. At the bottom of the box, I found a sealed manila envelope. Unlike the toys and equipment, this seemed intended for human understanding. With Rex still watching attentively, I opened it and pulled out a collection of photographs and a handwritten letter. The first photo showed a German shepherd that could have been Rex's twin, standing proudly beside a police officer in the department's older uniform style. The dog wore the same harness I'd just found in the box, the name Atlas clearly visible. But it was the officer that caused me to almost drop the photo. Though younger, with fewer lines around his eyes and darker hair, the face was instantly recognizable: Captain David Mercer, my current commanding officer. In the photo, he couldn't have been much older than I was now, his expression serious but undeniably proud as he stood beside his K9 partner. The second photo showed Atlas in action, scaling a training wall. Another captured him receiving some kind of departmental award, a medal being placed around his neck while he sat at perfect attention. But it was the final photo that made my heart constrict. Atlas lay on what appeared to be a veterinary examination table, his body relaxed, but his eyes alert. Captain Mercer sat beside him, one hand resting on the dog's head, his face turned away from the camera. Even in profile, the grief in his expression was unmistakable. This was a goodbye photo, the kind taken when a beloved animal is about to be put to rest. With unsteady hands, I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was precise and formal, immediately recognizable as Captain Mercer's meticulous script, to whom it may concern. The items in this box belong to K9 Officer Atlas, badge number K21, who served the Riverside Police Department with distinction for 9 years. Atlas was more than a police dog. He was the finest partner a handler could ask for, loyal beyond measure and braver than most humans I've known. Atlas was put to rest on June 8, 2013, after a brief but aggressive battle with hemangiosarcoma. He remained dignified and dutiful until his final moments. Department policy required that his equipment be returned, but I could not bear to surrender these personal items. They are tangible reminders of a bond that transcended our working relationship. If you are reading this letter, it means I have finally found the strength to part with these mementos, or time has made the decision for me. Either way, I ask that whoever finds this collection treats it with the respect due to an officer who gave everything to his service. Atlas saved my life on March 22, 2010, during a warehouse search that turned violent. He took a knife meant for me and still managed to subdue the suspect. He carried the scar from that day with the quiet dignity that defined him. I do not know if there is a place where we reunite with those we've lost, but I hope there is. Until then, these items stand as testament to a partnership that made me not only a better officer, but a better man. With respect and gratitude, Captain David Mercer, K9 Unit Supervisor, 2008-2015. I lowered the letter, my vision blurring slightly. Beside me, Rex remained fixated on the contents of the box, his nose occasionally twitching as he processed the scents embedded in these artifacts. How did this end up in my basement? I wondered aloud. The box had clearly been packed years ago with tremendous care and emotional weight. Captain Mercer wasn't the type of man who would casually misplace something so significant. And then it hit me. 3 years ago, when I'd bought this house, Captain Mercer had helped me move. He'd arrived with his pickup truck and spent the day hauling furniture and boxes. This must have been among the items he'd transported, perhaps accidentally mixed with my belongings during the chaos of moving day. But that didn't explain Rex's reaction. He'd joined the force long after Atlas had passed away. There was no way he could have known the dog personally, unless... I reached for my phone again, this time calling the department's administrative office. Though it was Saturday, I knew Dolores would be there. She practically lived at her desk. Records and administration, this is Dolores. Her familiar no-nonsense tone was oddly comforting. Dolores, it's Connor. I need you to check something in the K9 unit records. I'm looking for information on a police dog named Atlas badge, number K21. Specifically, I need to know about his bloodline. This couldn't wait until Monday? She asked, though I could already hear her keyboard clacking. It's important, I promise. Hold on. More typing followed, then a few clicks. All right, I've got his file. Atlas German Shepherd served under. Then Sergeant Mercer from 2004 to 2013. Distinguished service record, multiple commendations. What about his breeding information? I pressed. Let's see. He was bred from the department's program. Sire was Baron von Hohenzollern, dam was Freya vom Schwarzwald. 3 littermates, all entered police service in various departments. She paused. There's a note here about preserved genetic material. Apparently, Atlas's bloodline was considered exceptional enough that Captain Mercer arranged for, samples to be kept for the breeding program. My heart rate quickened. Can you cross-reference that with Rex's breeding records? The silence that followed was punctuated only by the sound of Dolores's efficient typing. Well, that's interesting, she finally said. Rex's dam, Ziva, was bred with preserved genetic material from Atlas. According to this, Rex is technically Atlas's son, though Atlas had been deceased for nearly 2 years when Rex was born. The revelation hit me like a physical force. Rex wasn't just randomly reacting to the scent of another K9 officer's equipment. He was responding to the scent of his biological father. A father he'd never known, but whose genetic memory somehow lived in him. Thanks, Dolores. That's exactly what I needed to know. Care to tell me why you're digging into K9 genealogy on a Saturday morning? She asked. It's a long story. I'll explain on Monday. I hung up and turned back to Rex, seeing him with new eyes. You knew, didn't you? Somehow you recognized his scent. But I reached out to stroke his head, and for the first time since I'd discovered the box, Rex broke his fixation on it to look directly at me. His dark eyes seemed to hold an ancient wisdom, a connection to something I could barely comprehend. I carefully returned each item to the box, handling them with the reverence they deserved. The harness, the blanket, the toy, the photos, and the letter, each a piece of a story that had unexpectedly intersected with our own. We need to return these to Captain Mercer, I told Rex. They were never meant to be lost. Rex didn't object, as I closed the box, though he maintained his watchful position beside it. Whatever protective instinct had triggered his earlier aggression had transformed into something else, a patient guardianship, a willingness to escort these mementos back to where they belonged. I loaded the box carefully into my truck, Rex jumping into the passenger seat without being prompted. As we drove toward Captain Mercer's house across town, I couldn't help but marvel at the invisible connections that bound us. Not just Handler and K9, but generations of partnerships, bloodlines that carried forward not just physical traits, but something deeper, something that defied easy explanation. The morning sun broke through the clouds as we turned onto the captain's street, illuminating the raindrops that still clung to the trees and power lines. In the passenger seat, Rex sat tall, his posture reminiscent of the proud stance Atlas had shown in those photographs. Different dogs separated by time, yet connected by something profound, something that had survived death itself to manifest in this moment. I parked in front of the modest craftsman house where Captain Mercer had lived alone since his wife's passing 5 years earlier. As I reached for the box in the back seat, I wondered how he would react to its return. Would it bring back painful memories, or would it offer some measure of comfort to know that these treasured items had found their way back to him? Rex waited patiently as I gathered the box. His earlier protective aggression completely vanished. Whatever mission had driven him to guard these mementos now seemed to be transforming into something else, a solemn duty to return them to their rightful owner. As we approached the front door, I realized that what had begun as a simple basement, cleanup had uncovered something profound about loyalty, memory, and the mysterious bonds that connect us across time. Rex had recognized something I couldn't perceive, the scent of his own origins, preserved in a box I'd nearly discarded without a second thought. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell, the weight of the box in my arms feeling suddenly significant. Inside were not just the possessions of a deceased police dog, but tangible evidence of a connection that transcended the ordinary, a reminder that what we consider lost might simply be waiting to be rediscovered. Captain Mercer's approaching footsteps echoed from inside, and beside me, Rex sat at attention, as if preparing to meet not just my commanding officer, but a man who represented a vital link to his own history. In that moment, I understood that we were about to return more than just a box of mementos. We were delivering a piece of the past that, against all odds, had refused to be forgotten. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Captain David Mercer opened his front door with the brisk efficiency that had defined his 27 years on the force. Even on a Saturday morning, dressed in faded jeans and a department softball league t-shirt, he carried himself with military precision. His expression shifted from polite inquiry to confusion as he registered, who stood on his porch. "Connor, is everything all right?" His eyes moved from me to Rex, then widened slightly as they landed on the box in my arms. Something flickered across his weathered features, recognition, followed quickly by disbelief. "Sir, I think I have something that belongs to you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Something important." The captain's gaze remained fixed on the box, his hands clenching briefly at his sides before he stepped back, wordlessly inviting us in. Rex entered with unusual reverence, his normally confident stride measured and deliberate as he crossed the threshold. Captain Mercer's home reflected the man himself, orderly, unpretentious, with a quiet dignity in its simplicity. Awards and commendations hung alongside family photos in the entryway, the kind of honorable career display that inspired rookies without crossing into vanity. He led us to a spacious living room where morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating bookshelves lined with law enforcement texts and military history. Without speaking, he cleared a space on the coffee table, then gestured for me to set down the box. "Where did you find this?" he finally asked, his voice tight with controlled emotion. I explained about the basement flood, the cleanup, and Rex's extraordinary reaction. As I spoke, Captain Mercer's eyes never left the box, as though he expected it might vanish if he looked away. "I didn't realize it was yours, sir. It must have gotten mixed in with my things when you helped me move." The captain nodded slowly, processing this. 3 years, he murmured. "I searched everywhere for it. Eventually convinced myself I must have finally taken it to the department's memorial storage like I'd planned." He paused, his gaze shifting to Rex, who sat attentively beside the coffee table. "And you say Rex recognized it somehow?" "More than recognized it," I explained. "He protected it, aggressively. I've never seen him react that way to anything." I hesitated before adding, "I called Dolores at Records. We found the connection. Atlas was Rex's biological father," Captain Mercer finished, surprising me. "I know. I'm the one who recommended using Atlas's preserved genetic material when they were selecting the sire for Ziva's litter. I saw the potential in continuing his bloodline." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "That's why I requested you as his handler when he completed training." This revelation stunned me. "You selected me for Rex. I thought the assignments were randomized." The captain shook his head. "Canine partnerships are too important for random pairings. I saw something in you that reminded me of myself at your age. The same dedication, the same capacity for that special bond." His eyes returned to the box. "May I?" I nodded, and with careful reverence, Captain Mercer opened the box that had traveled such an unlikely path back to him. His hands, which had directed major operations and commanded dozens of officers, trembled slightly as he lifted out the leather harness. "Atlas wore this his entire career," he said softly, "from his first day on patrol to his last." His fingers traced the name, embroidered on the side. The department wanted to issue him a new tactical vest, but he worked better in this, said it was ridiculous to fix what wasn't broken. The captain spoke about the harness as if discussing the preference of a human partner, not a dog. But in that moment, I understood completely. Hadn't I accommodated Rex's peculiarities over the years with the same deference? The way he preferred to enter buildings from the right side, how he insisted on circling a suspect 3 times before settling into his guard position. Rex edged closer as Captain Mercer continued unpacking the box, nose twitching as each item emerged. When the captain pulled out the frayed rope toy, Rex made a soft sound in his throat. Not quite a whine, not quite a bark. "You want to see this, boy?" Captain Mercer asked, holding the toy toward Rex with surprising gentleness. Rex sniffed it carefully, then backed away slightly, as if respecting that it wasn't his to claim. The captain smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his usually stern face. Atlas would carry this everywhere during his off-duty time, wouldn't surrender it to anyone except me, and even then only reluctantly. He set the toy aside and pulled out the thermal blanket, unfolding it partially across his lap. This saved his life once. We were searching for a missing hiker in the mountains, got caught in a sudden snowstorm, had to shelter in a cave for nearly 12 hours before rescue reached us. I wrapped him in this to keep him warm. As he continued through the items, Captain Mercer shared stories about each one. The medal Atlas had received for tracking a kidnapper through 3 counties, the custom collar given to him by a child he'd found after she'd wandered into the woods. Each artifact carried not just a tale of service, but a piece of the profound partnership that had existed between the captain and his K9. When he finally reached the photographs, Captain Mercer's professional composure cracked. He held the final image, the one taken at the veterinary clinic, for a long time without speaking. "Hemangiosarcoma," he said eventually. "Aggressive cancer that often isn't detected until it's too late. By the time Atlas showed symptoms, the disease had already spread throughout his system." He ran a thumb gently over the image. He never complained, never showed pain until the very end, just kept trying to work, kept trying to serve. The room fell silent except for the rhythmic ticking of a wall clock. Rex had settled into a sphinx position, watching the captain with an intensity that seemed almost supernatural, as if he were absorbing not just the scent, but the emotional imprint of the father he'd never known. "There's something else you should see," Captain Mercer said suddenly, setting the box aside and standing. "Wait here." He disappeared down a hallway, returning moments later with a leather-bound album that looked far more recent than the weathered contents of the box. He sat beside me on the couch and opened it, revealing page after page of photographs. Rex as a puppy, Rex in training, Rex at his academy graduation. "I've kept track of him from the beginning," the captain explained, turning pages filled with images I'd never seen before. Rex and me at department ceremonies, working crime scenes, even casual shots taken during K9 unit picnics and training days. "Sir, I had no idea," I managed, both touched and slightly unnerved by this revelation. "I know it might seem strange," he acknowledged, "but watching Rex's career has been healing, seeing Atlas's legacy continue through him." He pointed to a photo of Rex clearing a 6-foot wall during a competition. Atlas had the same form, the same determination. And this, he turned to a shot of Rex standing protectively beside me after I'd been injured during an arrest. This devotion to his handler, that's pure Atlas. The realization dawned slowly. For years, Captain Mercer had been quietly observing and documenting Rex's career, finding echoes of his beloved partner in this genetic successor. What might have seemed inappropriate surveillance in another context was, I now understood, a form of ongoing connection, a way for the captain to honor his fallen partner by witnessing his bloodline's continued service. "When I received the call that Rex had been injured last year during that warehouse raid," Captain Mercer said, his voice lowering, "it felt like losing Atlas all over again. I pulled every string I could to ensure he got the best veterinary specialists, even though department policy would have limited the medical intervention. I'd always wondered how Rex had received such exceptional care after being stabbed during that raid, treatment far beyond what the department typically Authorized for canine officers. Now it made perfect sense. "You're the reason he recovered so quickly," I said, the pieces falling into place. The captain nodded. "I couldn't save Atlas, but I could help save his son." A profound silence settled between us as I processed this unexpected connection that had shaped not just Rex's life and career, but my own as well. My assignment to Rex, our partnership, even the exceptional support we'd received during difficult times, all influenced by this unseen thread of loyalty, extending from Captain Mercer to his fallen partner and beyond. Rex shifted position, moving to sit directly beside Captain Mercer's chair. It was a subtle gesture, but a meaningful one. In our years of partnership, I'd come to understand Rex's body language as clearly as spoken words. This was a show of respect, of acknowledgement. Captain Mercer seemed to understand it too. He reached out slowly, allowing Rex to sniff his hand before gently stroking the dog's head. "You've done well," he said softly, and though the words were directed at Rex, I felt they encompassed us both. "When Rex retired," I said, "I worried he'd struggle with the transition. He'd been a working dog his entire life. But he adapted, immediately, like he'd been waiting for this chapter all along." The captain smiled faintly. "Atlas was the same way. His last week, when he was too sick to work, but before we knew exactly how bad it was, he seemed at peace with being home, watching the neighborhood from the front window, sleeping by the fireplace." He paused, a distant look crossing his features. "I sometimes wonder if they understand more about life seasons than we do. They don't fight the inevitable the way humans tend to." Outside, rain had begun to fall again, a gentle patter against the windows that created a cocoon of intimacy around our unexpected gathering. For several minutes, we sat in contemplative silence, 3 lives connected by circumstances none of us could have anticipated. Finally, Captain Mercer closed the photo album and looked directly at me. "I'd like to show you something else. Something only a handful of people in the department know about." He stood and motioned for us to follow. Rex rose immediately, and I found myself trailing behind as the captain led us through the kitchen to a door I initially assumed opened into a pantry or utility room. Instead, it revealed a staircase leading down to what appeared to be a fully finished basement. Unlike the clinical order of the main floor, this space felt more personal, more lived in. One wall was covered with photographs, a visual history of the department's K9 unit dating back decades, training scenarios, award ceremonies, casual moments of handlers with their dogs. Atlas featured prominently in one section. But he wasn't alone. Every K9 officer who had served under Captain Mercer's command had their place in this chronicle. "The department maintains official records, of course," the captain explained as we descended the last few steps. "But those files don't capture what matters most, the partnerships, the bonds formed through years of service together. So I started keeping my own archive." The basement opened into a large room that had been converted into something between a museum and a memorial. Display cases contained retired K9 equipment labeled with the names of the dogs who had worn Idin. Shadow boxes held medals, certificates, and commendations. One corner featured a wall of honor with the names and badge numbers of every K9 officer who had died in the line of duty. But the center of the room held something that made my breath catch. A life-sized bronze statue of a German shepherd stood atop a granite pedestal. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, every detail from the alert posture to the intelligent eyes, captured with uncanny precision. Though no name was engraved on the base, I knew immediately who it represented. "Atlas," I said softly. Captain Mercer nodded. "Commissioned it 5 years after he passed. I couldn't bear the thought of him being forgotten, of his service being reduced to a file in storage or a name on a plaque alongside dozens of others." I circled the statue, taking in the remarkable likeness. The resemblance to Rex is uncanny. The bloodline is strong, the captain agreed, but it's more than physical traits that get passed down. The best handlers recognize that each dog carries something intangible from their predecessors, a kind of inherited wisdom, an instinctive understanding of the work. Rex approached the statue cautiously, circling it once before sitting directly in front of it, head tilted slightly, as if in assessment or recognition. The sight of him, the living dog communing with the bronze representation of his genetic father, created a lump in my throat that was difficult to swallow past. "This is why I was so insistent that you be assigned as Rex's handler, Captain," Mercer continued. "I saw in you what my captain must have seen in me all those years ago, someone who understood that a K9 partnership transcends the standard officer relationship, someone who would recognize that these dogs aren't equipment to be utilized but colleagues to be respected." He gestured to a glass display case in the corner of the room. Inside was a collection of items I recognized from department history, the original K9 unit formation documents from the 1960s, weathered training manuals, and a series of photographs showing the evolution of the program through the decades. "Every handler dog team writes their own chapter in this legacy," he said. "Some partnerships are effective but unremarkable. Others—" His eyes moved to the statue of Atlas, then to Rex still sitting before it. "Others become something extraordinary." I thought about our time together, the high-stakes searches, the apprehensions, the quiet nights on patrol when Rex's presence beside me had been the only constant in a shifting landscape of uncertainty. I thought about how he'd known, somehow, that the box contained something of profound significance, how he'd protected it even from me, understanding its importance before I could possibly comprehend it. "I've always known Rex was special," I said, "but I never understood exactly how until today." Captain Mercer turned to face me directly. "When I lost Atlas, I thought that chapter of my life had closed permanently. Finding this box again, seeing Rex's reaction to it, reminds me that some bonds don't end. They transform, continue in ways we may not recognize immediately." He walked to a desk in the corner and unlocked a drawer, removing a small wooden box inlaid with the department's K9 unit insignia. From it, he extracted a polished silver medallion attached to a navy blue ribbon. "This was awarded to Atlas posthumously for his career service," he explained. "The department creates two, one for official records and one for the handler." He held it out to me. "I want Rex to have this. A connection to his lineage, his heritage of service." The gesture overwhelmed me. Such medallions were deeply personal tokens, rarely shared outside immediate handler relationships. "Sir, I can't accept that. It belongs with you, with Atlas's memory." "Atlas's memory doesn't reside in objects," the captain said firmly. "It lives in the continuing work of the unit he helped build, in the standards he helped establish, and most tangibly, it lives in Rex." He pressed the medallion into my hand. "Honor doesn't diminish when it's shared, Connor. It multiplies." Rex had moved away from the statue and now stood beside me, his attention fixed on the medallion in my palm. With careful reverence, I lowered it to his level, allowing him to inspect it. He sniffed it once, then looked up at me with quiet expectation. I glanced at Captain Mercer, who nodded encouragement. Carefully, I slipped the ribbon over Rex's head, adjusting it so the medallion rested against his chest. The solemn dignity with which he received this honor, standing perfectly still, head high, created a moment of ceremonial grace I hadn't anticipated. "There's a tradition in military and service units," Captain Mercer said quietly. "The belief that we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, that their sacrifice and dedication make our own service possible." He looked from Rex to me. Today, that tradition takes on a literal meaning. Atlas's legacy flows directly through Rex and through your partnership with him. As we prepared to leave, Captain Mercer insisted we take the rope toy and one of the photos of Atlas, tangible connections between past and present. The rest of the items would remain with him, he explained, but these tokens belonged with Rex now, a bridge between father and son separated by time, but connected by purpose. Standing on the porch as rain continued to fall in gentle sheets, Captain Mercer watched as Rex settled into the passenger seat of my truck, the medallion still hanging proudly from his neck. "Take care of each other," the captain said, his usual authoritative tone softened with emotion, "and don't be strangers. This house could use some more life in it." As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror to see Captain Mercer still standing on his porch, a solitary figure framed by the doorway of a home that had held his private grief and dedication for so many years. Something had shifted today, for him, for Rex, for me. The mystery box that Rex had so fiercely protected had contained more than mementos. It had held connections that spanned generations, loyalties that transcended the expected boundaries between humans and their canine partners. Rex sat tall in the passenger seat, the silver medallion catching the diffused light that filtered through the rain-streaked windows. His posture reminded me of the bronze statue, alert, dignified, purposeful. For the first time, I saw him not just as my partner, but as part of a continuum, carrying forward a legacy begun long before either of us had entered service. The revelation about Captain Mercer's influence on our partnership might have felt manipulative in another context. Instead, it struck me as a profound act of faith, the belief that the connection he'd shared with Atlas could find new expression through Rex and me. He hadn't just been watching over us, he had been entrusting us with something precious, something he'd feared lost when Atlas died. As we turned onto my street, Rex shifted slightly, his gaze moving from the road ahead to "Fix on me." In his dark eyes, I saw the same steady intelligence, the same unwavering loyalty I'd come to rely on through our years together. But now I recognized something else too, an inheritance of purpose that connected him to a greater tradition of service. The box that had nearly ended up in the trash had instead opened a door to understanding that would forever change how I viewed our partnership. Rex had always been exceptional, but now I understood why. He carried within him not just genetic traits, but something more profound, a kind of inherited wisdom that had manifested in his extraordinary instinct to protect Atlas's memory. As I parked in my driveway, I reached over to touch the medallion resting against Rex's chest. "So that's why you wouldn't let me throw away that box?" I said softly. "You were protecting your father's legacy." Rex leaned into my touch, a gesture of connection that spoke more eloquently than words ever could. Together, we sat in the quiet, car, rain drumming on the roof, while I contemplated the mysterious bonds that had brought us to this moment, the invisible threads of loyalty, memory, and service that had proven stronger than time itself. The week following our visit to Captain Mercer's home brought an unexpected shift in Rex's behavior, subtle changes that might have gone unnoticed had I not been paying closer attention. He carried Atlas's rope toy everywhere, treating it with unusual gentleness, never chewing or damaging it as he did with his own toys. The medallion remained on a shelf in the living room where Rex could see it, and several times a day I'd find him sitting before it, head tilted in what almost resembled contemplation. My basement cleanup remained unfinished, the flood damage still demanding attention, but somehow those practical concerns had receded in importance. Something more significant had been set in motion, a realignment of understanding that demanded space to unfold. On Wednesday morning, my phone rang just as Rex and I were returning from our dawn run. Captain Mercer's name flashed on the screen. "Connor, I hope I'm not calling too early." His voice carried its usual authoritative tone, but with an undercurrent of enthusiasm I rarely heard from him. "Not at all, sir. Rex and I just got back from a run." "Good, good." A brief pause. "I've been thinking about our conversation, about Atlas and Rex. There's something I'd like to discuss with you both, if you're available this afternoon." The formal phrasing made me smile, as if Rex might have a conflicting appointment to consider. "We're both free, sir." "Excellent. Meet me at the training facility at 2. The old one on Westridge, not headquarters." He hesitated. "And Connor, bring the medallion." The call ended before I could ask why, leaving me puzzled but intrigued. The Westridge facility was the department's original K9 training center, largely abandoned when the new state-of-the-art complex opened 5 years ago. Why meet there instead of at his home or the current headquarters? After a quick shower and breakfast, I found myself restless, mind cycling through possible reasons for this mysterious meeting. Rex sensed my agitation, staying closer than usual as I moved around the house. When I finally settled at my desk to catch up on paperwork, he lay directly across my feet, a grounding presence. I picked up a framed photo from my desk, Rex and me at his academy graduation, both of us looking impossibly young and earnest. His posture in the image mirrored the bronze statue of Atlas in Captain Mercer's basement, that same dignified alertness. Had Captain Mercer noticed that similarity too? Was that part of what he'd seen in Rex from the beginning? The medallion caught the morning light from its place on the shelf, sending reflections dancing across the ceiling. I walked over and picked it up, feeling its substantial weight in my palm. The front featured the department's K9 unit emblem in relief. The back was engraved with Atlas's name, badge number, and years of service. Between those simple markings lay a lifetime of dedication. Daily. Patrols, dangerous apprehensions, lives saved. A partnership that had defined both Atlas and Captain Mercer. When we arrived at the Westridge facility that afternoon, I was surprised to find the access gate unlocked and well-maintained, despite the center's supposed abandonment. Rex's demeanor changed the moment we turned into the gravel driveway. His body tensed with alertness, nose working overtime as he processed what must have been a complex landscape of scents. The facility itself looked surprisingly active. The main building had been freshly painted, and the training yard showed signs of recent use. Equipment arranged in what appeared to be a standard certification course layout. Captain Mercer's department SUV was parked near the entrance, alongside 2 other vehicles I didn't recognize. Rex exited the truck with practiced efficiency, his stride purposeful as we approached the main building. I noticed he was carrying himself differently, head higher, movements more precise, as if he were reporting for duty rather than accompanying me on a mysterious errand. Inside, the front office was empty, but voices echoed from down the hallway. We followed the sound to the large classroom that had once served as the K9 unit's primary briefing area. The room had been transformed since I'd last seen it during my handler certification years ago. New equipment lined the walls, updated training. Materials filled the bookshelves, and the old projection screen had been replaced with a modern digital display. Captain Mercer stood near the front of the room, deep in conversation with 2 people I didn't immediately recognize. A woman in her early 30s, with close-cropped hair and the confident bearing of a trainer, and an older man whose weathered face and calloused hands suggested years of practical experience. The captain looked up as we entered, his expression warming. "Connor, Rex, right on time." He gestured us forward. "I'd like you to meet Sergeant Maya Espinoza and Officer Jim. Brennan." I shook hands with both, recognition dawning. "You're from the Colorado K9 Search and Rescue Division," I said to Espinoza. Her reputation preceded her, the youngest handler ever to achieve master certification in wilderness search operations. She nodded. And you're the team that tracked the Riverside kidnapper through that flash flood last year. Rex's work on that case is already being used in our training materials. Jim Brennan, I learned, had been one of the original architects of the department's K-9 program back in the 1980s, now semi-retired but still actively involved in handler training and program development. "Sit down, Connor," Captain Mercer said, gesturing to the chairs arranged in a small circle. "We have something important to discuss." Rex took position beside my chair, alert but relaxed, occasionally glancing toward the large windows that overlooked the training yard. The familiar setting seemed to resonate with him, triggering the professional focus I'd always admired during our active duty. "As you know," Captain Mercer began, "the department's K-9 retirement program has improved significantly in recent years. Handlers can adopt their partners, medical care is subsidized, and retired K-9s receive the recognition they deserve for their service." He leaned forward slightly. "What you may not know is that there's been a gap in our system, a failure to utilize the experience and capabilities of these dogs once their active police work ends." Sergeant Espinosa picked up the thread. "Most K-9s retire because of age or physical limitations that make high-intensity police work unsustainable. But many of these dogs still have years of valuable service potential in less physically demanding roles." "We've been developing a transition program," Brennan added, his voice carrying the slight raspiness of age. "A way to redirect retired police K-9s into search and rescue operations, therapy work, or training support, depending on their individual strengths and limitations." Captain Mercer studied me for a moment. "When you mentioned Rex's seamless adjustment to retirement, it got me thinking. His file shows no significant physical limitations, just the standard onset of age-related changes that made the rigors of active police work increasingly challenging. But his tracking abilities, his intelligence, his work ethic, those remain exceptional." I glanced down at Rex, who had shifted to a more attentive posture, almost as if he understood he was being discussed. "He's been remarkably adaptable to civilian life," I said, "but I've noticed he still lights up whenever we're near anything that resembles work, training scenarios, problem-solving activities." "Exactly," Sergeant Espinosa said with enthusiasm. "These dogs are bred and trained for purpose-driven work. Retirement often leaves them without the mental stimulation and sense of mission they've built their lives around." Jim Brennan leaned back in his chair, eyes crinkling at the corners. "In the old days, we'd just transition them to a handler's home and that was it. End of service. We're finding now that many of these dogs thrive with continued purposeful work, even if it's different from their original training." Captain Mercer reached for a folder on the table and handed it to me. "This is the outline for our pilot program. We're starting with 5 retired K-9s who've shown particular aptitude for search and rescue operations. Based on Rex's service record, particularly his exceptional tracking skills in challenging environments, we believe he would be an ideal candidate." I opened the folder, scanning the detailed program description. The transition would involve specialized training weekends over 3 months, followed by certification in wilderness search and recovery. Rex would retain his status as my partner, but we'd be on call for regional search operations when needed. "This wouldn't be like active police duty," Sergeant Espinosa clarified. "The deployments are less frequent, typically focused on missing persons rather than criminal apprehension. The physical demands are significant but different, endurance over speed, precision over force." As I continued reading, a particular phrase in the documentation caught my attention: "honoring the legacy of service through evolved purpose." The wording seemed deliberately chosen, resonating with my recent discoveries about Rex's lineage and Captain Mercer's dedication to preserving Atlas's memory. There's more to this than just the practical benefits of the program, isn't there? I asked, looking directly at Captain Mercer. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You're as perceptive as I gave you credit for. He gestured toward Brennan. Jim was Atlas's first trainer before he was assigned to me as a handler. When I shared with him what happened with the box, what Rex did, he had an interesting perspective to offer. Brennan nodded slowly. I've worked with thousands of dogs over 4 decades, seen every behavior pattern you can imagine. What Rex did with that box, recognizing and protecting something connected to his bloodline, despite never having direct contact with Atlas, that's exceptional. But not unprecedented, Sergeant Espinosa added. There's growing evidence that working dogs, particularly those with strong breeding programs like ours, can inherit more than just physical traits. They can inherit certain behavioral tendencies, aptitudes, even specific responses to stimuli. Captain Mercer's expression grew more earnest. When Atlas retired due to his illness, he was being evaluated for transition to search and rescue work. His tracking abilities were extraordinary. He could follow scent trails days old, through water, across impossible terrain. The pieces began to align in my mind, and Rex has shown similar capabilities. More than similar, Brennan confirmed, nearly identical aptitude patterns. Your flash flood tracking case? Atlas performed almost the exact same feat during a hurricane evacuation in 2011, followed a child's scent through actively flooding areas when every other dog failed. Captain Mercer reached for a small box on the table I hadn't noticed previously. Did you bring the medallion? I retrieved it from my pocket, the silver gleaming under the room's fluorescent lights. Captain Mercer took it and opened the box, revealing what appeared to be a custom-designed harness, smaller and lighter than standard police equipment, with specialized attachments and reflective trim marked with search and rescue insignia. This is the new SAR equipment we've developed specifically for transitioned K9s, he explained. If you agree to the program, this would be Rex's new working gear. He held out his hand for the medallion, then showed me a specially designed attachment point on the harness. The medallion would be incorporated here, a visible symbol of the legacy he's continuing. Rex had been watching our conversation, with that focused attention characteristic of working dogs taking in new information. When Captain Mercer held up the harness, his ears pivoted forward, body tensing with evident interest. "May I?" Captain Mercer asked, gesturing toward Rex. I nodded, and with ceremonial deliberation, the captain knelt beside Rex and carefully fitted the harness over his head and across his chest, securing the straps with practiced efficiency. He attached the medallion to the designated point on the shoulder, where it caught the light with each movement. The transformation was immediate and profound. Rex's entire demeanor shifted, head higher, eyes more alert, body poised as if ready for deployment. It wasn't just the equipment, it was the purpose it represented, the continuation of service, in a new form. "There's an old handler's saying," Jim Brennan said softly, "the harness makes the working dog. When they feel it on their backs, they know their purpose." We moved outside to the training yard, where Sergeant Espinosa had set up a simple demonstration scenario, a series of hidden scent articles along an increasingly challenging trail that wound through the property. I watched with growing amazement as Rex tackled the course with the same enthusiasm he'd shown in his prime, but with a new, methodical precision that seemed perfectly suited to search operations. "He's a natural," Sergeant Espinosa remarked, as Rex successfully located the final article hidden in a culvert nearly a quarter-mile from its origin point. The transition to SR methodology would be minimal. He's already showing the ideal search. Pattern, thorough, systematic, with excellent communication of finds. As Rex trotted back to us, medallion gleaming against his new harness, I felt a surge of pride mixed with something deeper, a sense of rightness, of continuity restored. This wasn't just a second career for a retired police dog. It was the fulfillment of a legacy that had nearly been lost, then recovered through Rex's extraordinary instinct to protect that box. The program requires your full commitment as his handler, Captain Mercer explained as we walked back toward the main building. Weekend training sessions for the first 3 months, followed by certification testing. After that, you'd be on. Call for regional search operations, typically a few deployments per month, depending on need and your availability. And if he's not suited for it after training, or if he doesn't enjoy the work, I asked. Then he retires completely with, "Our thanks," Sergeant Espinosa assured me. "This is entirely voluntary for both of you. The goal is to provide purpose and service opportunities for dogs who still have the drive and capability, not to force them into work they aren't suited for." As we discussed the practical details, Rex explored the training yard with renewed energy, investigating equipment with the focused curiosity of a dog who recognized his surroundings as a place of purpose. The medallion caught the afternoon sun as he moved, flashing like a beacon, Atlas's legacy literally illuminating Rex's path forward. Captain Mercer stepped beside me, watching Rex with evident satisfaction. "When I lost Atlas, I thought that chapter was closed forever," he said quietly. "Finding that box again, seeing Rex's reaction to it, understanding the connection between them, it's given me a different perspective on legacy." I nodded, understanding more profoundly now what he meant. It's not just about remembering, it's about continuing. Exactly. The captain's weathered face softened with rare vulnerability. Atlas can't continue his service directly, but through Rex, through this program, through the bloodline, something essential carries forward. As the afternoon light began to fade, we gathered our materials and prepared to leave. Rex seemed reluctant to depart, standing at attention, near the training equipment, as if waiting for the next exercise. "He knows," Jim Brennan observed with a knowing smile. "Dogs understand purpose better than we give them credit for. He recognizes that this place, that harness, means meaningful work." I approached Rex, kneeling beside him to adjust the new harness more comfortably across his shoulders. The medallion glinted between my fingers, a tangible connection between past and present, between father and son, between completed service and new purpose. "What do you think, partner?" I asked softly. "Ready for a new chapter?" Rex's response was immediate and unambiguous, a sharp bark of affirmation, the same signal he'd used throughout his career to indicate a positive find. The sound echoed across the training yard, carrying with it the certainty of decision. Captain Mercer laughed, a rare, unguarded sound. "I think that's settled then." As we drove home in the gathering dusk, Rex sat tall in the passenger seat, the new harness still in place, medallion catching the last rays of sunlight. The ordinary cardboard box that had started this journey, the one I'd nearly discarded during a routine cleanup, had unleashed a cascade of discoveries that now culminated in this unexpected new direction. I thought about the invisible connections that bound us, not just Rex and me as partners, but the broader lineage of service that stretched backward through Atlas and forward into whatever work awaited us now. The medallion wasn't just decorative, it was symbolic of that continuity, that inherited purpose that had manifested so powerfully when Rex placed himself between me and that seemingly unremarkable box. At home, Rex carried Atlas's rope toy to his bed, arranging it carefully beside him as he settled in. I removed the harness, placing it and the medallion on the shelf where he could see them, tangible reminders of the new purpose that awaited us. As I moved around the kitchen preparing dinner, I found myself reflecting on how quickly life can pivot, how profoundly meaning can emerge from what appears to be chance. If the basement hadn't flooded, if I hadn't decided to clean it, that particular day, if Rex hadn't recognized something profound in that ordinary cardboard box, none of what followed would have unfolded. The box that had nearly ended up in the trash had instead become a portal to understanding, a bridge between generations of service, a catalyst for renewal. That night, I received a text message from Captain Mercer, a photo of the bronze statue of Atlas in his basement memorial, now adorned with a matching SAR harness and medallion identical to Rex's. The caption read simply, "The legacy continues." I showed the image to Rex, who studied it with that same intense focus he'd shown with the original box. There was recognition in his gaze, not just of the image itself, but of the deeper meaning it represented. He looked from the phone to me, then to the harness on the shelf, a sequence of connections that spoke volumes without words. In that moment, I understood that what I'd discovered wasn't just a new opportunity for a retired police dog. It was a reminder that purpose doesn't end, it evolves. That legacy isn't just about remembering the past, it's about carrying forward what matters most. Rex settled beside me on the couch, his warmth a constant comfort against the chill of early spring. Tomorrow we would begin preparing for this new chapter, scheduling training sessions, studying the search and rescue protocols, adapting our routines to accommodate this unexpected evolution in our shared path. But tonight, in the quiet of our home, we simply rested in the knowledge that what had begun with a dog's fierce protection of a forgotten box had blossomed into something neither of us could have anticipated, a renewal of purpose, a continuation of service, a living legacy that would carry forward the best of what had come before us. The box itself now sat on my bookshelf, empty of its original contents but filled with new meaning. What Rex had protected so instinctively wasn't just physical mementos, but the intangible thread of connection, the inheritance of purpose that flowed through bloodlines and partnerships, through time and memory, creating bridges where there had seemed to be only endings. The transformation in Rex over the following weeks was remarkable. The search and rescue training awakened something in him that retirement from police work had temporarily subdued, a sense of focused purpose that manifested in everything from his posture to his energy levels. Even at home, between training sessions, he carried himself with renewed vitality, as if the connection to Atlas's legacy had rejuvenated not just his spirit, but his physical presence as well. Our first official SR training weekend arrived in early May, bringing perfect conditions, cool mornings that warmed to comfortable afternoons, with enough lingering spring moisture in the ground to hold scent trails effectively. We joined 4 other handler dog teams at the Regional Wilderness Training Center, a sprawling facility that bordered national forest land and offered terrain varying from meadows to dense woods to rocky inclines. Despite being the only retired police canine in the group, Rex integrated seamlessly. The other dogs were primarily breeds specifically selected for search work: 2 Labrador retrievers, a border collie, and a bloodhound, each with their own specialized strengths. What Rex lacked in the bloodhound's legendary scenting ability, he made up for with his years of disciplined training and remarkable problem-solving skills. "He's adapting the techniques from his police work," observed Lisa Chen, our lead trainer, as she watched Rex systematically clear a section of woodland during our second day. "See how he's using those quarter turns to check wind direction? That's classic patrol dog methodology, but he's modified it for the wider search pattern we use in SAR." I felt a surge of pride watching him work. At 7 years old, Rex was the senior member of our training group, but he attacked each exercise with the enthusiasm of a much younger dog, while bringing a methodical precision that could only come from experience. The medallion gleamed against his SAR harness as he moved through the dappled forest light, a constant reminder of the legacy he carried. Several of the other handlers had noticed it, commenting on its unusual design. It belonged to his father, I'd explained to Lisa during our lunch break, sharing the condensed version of how we'd discovered Atlas's box and the subsequent revelations about Rex's lineage. That explains a lot, she'd responded thoughtfully. Working dogs with strong bloodlines often inherit more than just physical traits. There's something about purpose and drive that seems to pass through generations, especially in dogs bred, specifically for service. By Sunday afternoon, as we completed our final training scenario, a complex multi-victim search across varied terrain, Rex had earned the respect of everyone in the group. The instructors had positioned 3 volunteer victims across a 2-mile section of forest, each hidden with varying levels of concealment. While the other dogs successfully located 1 or 2 targets, Rex methodically found all 3, including one that had been deliberately placed in a location designed to test the limits of conventional search patterns. "Remarkable work," said Jim Brennan, who had driven up to observe our progress. Atlas had that same ability to think beyond the obvious, to solve the puzzle rather than just follow the training. As we packed up our gear, preparing for the drive home, Captain Mercer called. I hadn't expected to hear from him, knowing he was scheduled for a conference in Washington, D.C. that weekend. "I've been getting updates from Jim," he said without preamble. "Sounds like Rex is excelling." "He's surpassing expectations," I confirmed, watching as Rex dozed in the passenger seat, physically tired but radiating contentment. "The trainers think he'll be ready for certification ahead of schedule." "That doesn't surprise me." There was a pause, then, "I have something for you both when I get back. Something from Atlas's service that I think might be meaningful for Rex's new chapter." Ding. My curiosity was piqued, but Captain Mercer offered no further details, promising only that he would contact me when he returned midweek. The call came Wednesday evening. "Meet me at Riverview Park tomorrow at 0700, the captain said cryptically. "Eastern Trail entrance. Bring Rex in his SAR gear." Riverview Park was a sprawling natural area that bordered the river about 20 minutes from my house. I knew it primarily as a popular hiking destination with miles of interconnected trails, winding through diverse ecosystems. What I didn't understand was why Captain Mercer wanted to meet there rather than at the training facility or his home. We arrived exactly at 7 the next morning to find the captain already waiting, dressed not in his usual department uniform but in hiking clothes, a small backpack at his feet. Beside him stood an older woman I didn't recognize, tall and slender, with silver-streaked dark hair and the weathered complexion of someone who spent considerable time outdoors. "Connor, Rex, glad you could make it," Captain Mercer greeted us. "This is Dr. Eleanor Reeves. She was the veterinary specialist who treated Atlas during his illness." Dr. Reeves extended her hand. "David's told me about your remarkable discovery," she said, her voice carrying the slight lilt of a Scottish accent, "and about Rex's transition to search and rescue. It's an honor to meet you both." Rex approached her with unusual familiarity, sniffing her extended hand and then pressing his head against her leg, a gesture of affection he typically reserved for people he knew well. "He remembers your scent," Captain Mercer observed. From the items in the box, Dr. Reeves knelt to Rex's level, gently stroking his head. "I spent quite a bit of time with Atlas during his final months," she explained to me. "My scent would have been on many of his belongings." This unexpected connection, Rex recognizing the scent of the veterinarian who had cared for his father, reinforced the extraordinary web of associations that had emerged since we'd discovered that ordinary cardboard box in my basement. "I have something to show you both," Captain Mercer said, gesturing toward the trailhead, "a place that was significant to Atlas and to me. I think it's important for Rex to see it, now that he's following a similar path." We set off along the Eastern Trail, which followed the riverbank before curving upward through a stand of old-growth oak and maple trees. Rex moved confidently at my side, the SAR harness and Atlas's medallion catching the early morning sunlight that filtered through the canopy above. Atlas and I came here nearly every weekend during his last months, Captain Mercer explained as we walked, when he became too ill for police work, but before we understood how serious his condition was. He loved the river trail. Dr. Reeves nodded. Activity was important for him, even as the disease progressed. These walks kept his spirits up, gave him purpose. The trail narrowed as we climbed higher, eventually opening onto a magnificent overlook that provided a panoramic view of the river valley below. A large, flat boulder created a natural seating area, worn smooth by years of hikers pausing to enjoy the vista. Captain Mercer approached the rock formation, running his hand along its surface until he found what he was looking for, a small metal plaque, no larger than a playing card, affixed to the stone. The simple inscription read, Atlas, Faithful Partner, 2004-2013. I had this placed here after he passed, the captain explained, his voice softening. It's not an official memorial, just a private marker in a place that meant something to us both. Rex approached the plaque, sniffing it carefully, then sat beside it with unusual stillness. The three of us watched in respectful silence as he maintained his vigil, the medallion on his harness positioned just inches from his father's memorial marker. After several minutes, Dr. Reeves spoke gently. Animals understand more than we often credit them with. Connection, loss, legacy, these aren't exclusively human concepts. Captain Mercer nodded, then reached into his backpack and withdrew a small wooden box, inlaid with the K9 unit insignia, similar to the one that had held Atlas's medallion, but slightly larger. This is what I wanted to give you, he said, handing it to me. Open it here. Inside, nestled in velvet lining, lay a finely crafted leather collar with a distinctive rectangular tag attached. The tag was made of polished silver, engraved with Atlas's name and badge number on one side. I turned it over to find an inscription on the reverse. Where courage leads, I will follow. This was Atlas's off-duty collar, Captain Mercer explained. He wore it during our personal time together, including every hike on this trail. The inscription was my addition, a reminder of the standard he set, not just in service, but in facing every challenge, including his final one. The gift rendered me momentarily speechless. This wasn't a department-issued piece of equipment, but something deeply personal, a symbol of the relationship between handler and K9 partner that extended beyond their official duties. I want Rex to have it, the captain continued, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. Now that he's transitioning to this new role, it seems fitting that he carry forward this particular piece of Atlas's legacy. Dr. Reeves placed a gentle hand on the captain's shoulder. David, that's a beautiful gesture. With reverence, I lifted the collar from its case. The leather was supple from years of use, carrying the patina that comes only from being worn and cared for. Over time, I held it toward Rex, who had moved to stand directly before me. He sniffed it thoroughly, then looked up with an intensity that needed no interpretation. May I asked the captain, who nodded. Carefully, I removed Rex's regular collar and replaced it with Atlas's, adjusting it to fit comfortably. The silver tag gleamed against his chest, just below the medallion that adorned his SAR harness. The effect was striking, visible symbols of both his father's legacy and his own continuing journey. There's something else, Captain Mercer said, reaching again into his backpack. He withdrew a rolled document, secured with a simple ribbon. Atlas's complete service record, every case, every commendation, every training note. I've highlighted the tracking cases that seem most relevant to Rex's SAR work. scenarios where Atlas used techniques that might be adaptable to wilderness search operations. This second gift was equally meaningful, a practical resource that could help shape Rex's new career while connecting it directly to his father's service. The thoughtfulness behind both items reinforced my growing understanding of how deeply Captain Mercer had invested in this connection between past and present, between Atlas and Rex. "I don't know what to say," I managed finally. "Thank you doesn't seem adequate." "No thanks needed," he replied with uncharacteristic gentleness. "This completes a circle that I thought had been broken when Atlas died. Seeing his legacy continue through Rex, watching him take on this new chapter of service, it's healing something I didn't realize was still raw." Dr. Reeves had been quietly observing our exchange, her professional reserve softened by evident emotion. "In my work, I've seen how profound the bond between handlers and their canine partners can be," she said. "What's remarkable here is seeing that bond extend beyond a single partnership, creating a continuity across generations." We remained at the Overlook for nearly an hour, Captain Mercer sharing stories about Atlas's notable cases, particularly those involving tracking in challenging environments. Dr. Reeves added her own perspectives on Atlas's character, his stoicism during treatment, his unfailing recognition of her whenever she entered the examination room, his protective instinct toward the captain even when his own health was failing. Rex listened to these conversations with unusual attentiveness, his gaze shifting between the humans as if following the narrative. Occasionally, he would touch his nose to the memorial plaque, a gesture that seemed almost reverential. As we prepared to leave, Captain Mercer paused for a final moment beside the marker. "When I had this placed here, I thought it represented an ending," he said quietly. "Now I understand it's just one point in a continuing journey." The descent along the trail passed in companionable silence, each of us processing the emotional weight of the morning's exchange. Rex moved with particular grace, the unfamiliar collar seeming to bestow an additional dignity to his already proud bearing. At the trailhead, Dr. Reeves handed me her business card. "I specialize in working dogs now, particularly those transitioning between service roles," she explained. "If you have any questions as Rex progresses through the SAR training, please don't hesitate to call. I'd be honored to provide any support I can." As we prepared to part ways, Captain Mercer cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. The department is hosting a formal ceremony next month for the K9 officers transitioning to the SAR program. I'd like both of you to attend as honored guests." "We'll be there," I promised, understanding the significance of such a public acknowledgement of the connection between Atlas and Rex. Driving home, with Rex dozing peacefully in the passenger seat, Atlas's collar gleaming against his fur, I reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had unfolded from that simple moment in my basement, a moment when a seemingly ordinary cardboard box had triggered an extraordinary protective response from my canine partner. If Rex hadn't stopped me from discarding that box, none of what followed would have occurred. The discovery of Atlas's mementos, the revelation about Rex's lineage, the connection with Captain Mercer on a deeper level, and now this new pathway into search and rescue work that honored both Rex's abilities and his father's legacy. That evening, I spread Atlas's service record across my desk, reading through the meticulously documented cases, training evaluations and commendations. The parallels between his career and Rex's were remarkable. Both had demonstrated exceptional tracking abilities. Both had shown unusual initiative in developing novel approaches to complex scenarios. Both had formed partnerships with their handlers that transcended standard working relationships. Rex lay nearby, Atlas's collar still in place, the silver tag occasionally catching the lamplight as he shifted position. The ordinary cardboard box that had started this journey sat on my bookshelf, empty now of its original contents, but filled. with new significance, a humble vessel that had contained not just physical mementos, but connections that spanned time, relationships that defied conventional understanding, and a legacy that refused to be forgotten. Our first official SAR deployment came sooner than expected. Just 2 weeks after our training weekend, as Rex was continuing to progress through the certification process, a call came in at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. An elderly man with dementia had wandered away from his assisted living facility on the outskirts of town. He'd been missing for approximately 4 hours, with temperatures dropping dangerously in the wooded area where security cameras had last captured him heading. Though Rex wasn't yet fully certified, Sergeant Espinoza authorized our participation given the urgent nature of the situation and Rex's advanced progress in training. We arrived at the facility just before 3 a.m., joining 2 other SAR teams and local law enforcement in establishing a search perimeter. Rex stood alert as I fitted him with his SAR harness, the medallion and Atlas's collar tag, both visible in the harsh emergency lighting that illuminated the staging area. I noticed several officers glancing at these distinctive markers, though in the urgency of the moment, no one asked about their significance. Sergeant Espinoza approached with a plastic bag containing the missing man's pajama top. "Standard scent article," she explained. "We're dividing the search area into quadrants. Given Rex's background in urban tracking, I'd like you to take the section where the forest borders the residential development. It's the most complex environment with multiple potential scent contaminations." The assignment recognized Rex's particular strengths, his ability to distinguish target scents even in areas with significant human activity. This had been one of his exceptional skills as a police K9, and it was translating effectively to his SAR work. I offered the scent article for Rex to process, watching as he took several deep inhalations, committing the older man's specific scent signature to memory. His focus was immediate and total, the same intense concentration I'd seen countless times during our police work together. We set out along the forest edge, Rex working methodically in the expanding search pattern we'd practiced during training. Though the darkness complicated the physical aspects of the search, it actually enhanced scent conditions, the cool night air helping to preserve and carry odors that might dissipate in daytime heat. For nearly an hour, Rex quartered our assigned sector with determined precision. I watched him process the competing environmental information, following, evaluating, discarding, refocusing with each new scent current. This was the invisible work of search dogs, the complex olfactory analysis that human handlers could only dimly comprehend. Then suddenly, his behavior changed. His head lifted sharply, body tensing as he caught something promising in the air. Without hesitation, he veered off our planned route, pulling confidently toward a densely wooded ravine that dropped away from the main trail. I followed, trusting his judgment implicitly. The ravine was steep and treacherous, especially in the limited illumination of my flashlight. As we descended carefully, Rex's excitement grew, his pace quickening despite the challenging terrain. The medallion and collar tag clinked softly together as he moved, creating a gentle rhythm that seemed to punctuate his determination. At the bottom of the ravine, where a small stream created a natural boundary, Rex suddenly broke into a controlled run, following the watercourse for several hundred yards before stopping abruptly beside a fallen oak that bridged the narrow channel. He gave a sharp bark, the alert signal we'd been practicing, and turned to ensure I was following. There, huddled in the hollow beneath the fallen tree, lay our missing person, cold, disoriented, but alive. The elderly man had wedged himself into the natural shelter, his light clothing soaked from the stream, his thin frame shivering uncontrollably in the night air. As I radioed our position and began emergency care procedures, Rex maintained a vigilant position beside the man, occasionally nosing his hand gently as if offering reassurance. The medallion and tag caught my flashlight beam, glinting in the darkness. twin symbols of service continued across generations, of purpose fulfilled in new forms. It took the medical team nearly 40 minutes to reach our location with the specialized equipment needed for a ravine extraction. During that time, I shared my emergency blanket with the missing man, while Rex pressed against his other side, providing vital body warmth. The simple animal comfort he offered seemed as important as the practical assistance, a reminder that search and rescue work engaged not just a dog's physical capabilities, but their profound capacity for compassion. As the extraction team arrived and took over, the supervising paramedic paused to acknowledge Rex's contribution. "That's some dog you've got there," he said, watching as Rex maintained his protective position even as professional care was initiated. Most people wouldn't have survived much longer in these conditions. "He's continuing a family tradition," I replied, my hand automatically moving to touch the medallion on Rex's harness. Atlas's legacy made tangible in this moment of service. Back at the command post, as the medical helicopter lifted off with our now stabilized missing person, Sergeant Espinosa approached with unmistakable approval in her expression. "Exceptional work," she said, kneeling to Rex's level to offer deserved praise. Her fingers brushed the medallion. "Captain Mercer told me about this, about Atlas. Something tells me he would be proud of tonight's work." His first save, I said, the significance of the moment settling over me. This wasn't just Rex's inaugural successful search as an SAR dog. It was the first link in a new chain of service that connected directly back to his father's legacy. As we drove home in the gentle light of dawn, Rex sat tall in the passenger seat, exhausted but visibly satisfied. Atlas's collar caught the rising sun, the inscription now visible in the growing light. "Where courage leads, I will follow." In that moment, it felt like more than just a sentiment engraved on metal. It was a perfect distillation of the journey that had begun with the dog's instinctive protection of a forgotten box. A journey that had revealed connections across time, purpose that transcended conventional boundaries, and a legacy that refused to be discarded. The ceremony recognizing the K-9 officers transitioning to the search and rescue program was scheduled for a Saturday in late June. In the weeks following Rex's first successful rescue, his training had accelerated, with Sergeant Espinosa fast-tracking his certification process based on his exceptional performance. What might have taken months to complete was accomplished in weeks, culminating in Rex receiving full SR certification 2 days before the ceremony. "It's unprecedented," Lisa Chen had told me after Rex completed his final evaluation. "We've never certified a K9 this quickly, but his performance has been extraordinary. It's like he's been doing this work his entire life." The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect early summer day that seemed designed for commemorations. I carefully groomed Rex, his coat gleaming in the morning light as I fitted him with his now familiar SR harness, Atlas's medallion polished to a brilliant shine. Around his neck, Atlas's collar with its silver tag completed the ensemble. Tangible connections to the legacy he was continuing. Captain Mercer had arranged for the ceremony to be held at the Westridge training facility, the venue thoughtfully chosen to honor both the past and future of the K9 program. When we arrived, I was surprised by the scope of the event. What I had expected to be a small departmental function had expanded into something more significant. The training yard had been transformed with rows of chairs, a podium draped with both the department and SAR unit flags, and a professional photographer documenting the proceedings. More unexpected was the attendance. Beyond the expected department, personnel and SAR team members, I spotted numerous retired K9 handlers, their service spanning decades, gathered near the back. Local government officials occupied the front row, and to my surprise, a contingent of hospital staff stood together on one side. including several nurses from the dementia unit whose patient Rex had located in the ravine. Dr. Eleanor Reeves approached as we entered, her professional reserve warmed by genuine pleasure at seeing Rex. "Your partner has become quite the celebrity," she remarked, gesturing toward a display board where photos of Rex's successful rescue had been prominently featured. "The gentleman you found in the ravine has made a complete recovery, by the way. His family asked me to extend their gratitude." Captain Mercer joined us, dressed in his formal uniform, every detail impeccable. "Connor, Rex, perfect timing. We're about to begin." He led us to reserved seats near the front, pausing briefly to adjust Rex's harness with the practiced hands of someone intimately familiar with K9 equipment. "Atlas's medallion looks right at home there," he noted with quiet satisfaction. The ceremony opened with traditional formalities, presentation of colors, national anthem, remarks from the police chief and SAR unit director, but it quickly evolved into something more personal as Captain Mercer took the podium. Instead of the brief procedural address I had expected, he launched into a heartfelt examination of the K9 program's evolution and the philosophy behind the new transition initiative. "These dogs devote their lives to service," he said, his authoritative voice carrying easily across the assembled crowd. "When age or physical limitations necessitate their retirement from active police duty, we've traditionally considered their service complete. But what we've come to understand is that their capacity for meaningful work often extends far beyond those artificial boundaries." He gestured toward the 5 K9 officers seated with their handlers in the front row, Rex among them, the only German shepherd in a group that included 2 Labradors, a border collie and a bloodhound. These exceptional animals represent not the end of service, but its transformation. They bring to their new search and rescue roles the discipline, intelligence, and dedication honed through years of police work, now redirected toward a different but equally vital mission. Captain Mercer then did something unexpected. He stepped away from the formal podium and moved to stand directly before the assembled K9 teams. His next words carried a more personal tone, as if speaking not to the wider audience, but specifically to the dogs and their handlers. "What you're embarking on today exists because of a legacy that preceded you," he said, his gaze moving deliberately across the group before settling on Rex. "A legacy of handlers and K9 partners who established the standards of excellence, courage, and unwavering loyalty that define this unit." From inside his uniform jacket, the captain withdrew a small object that caught the morning light, a medallion identical to the one Rex wore, but newer, unmarked by years of wear. "Each of you transitioning today will receive this symbol of your dual service," he explained, "a tangible reminder that what you've done matters and what you will do carries that importance forward." As the medallion was presented to each handler dog team, I noticed that Rex sat straighter, his attention fixed on the captain with unusual intensity. When our turn came, Captain Mercer paused longer than he had with the others, his hand briefly touching the original medallion on Rex's harness before presenting me with the new one. "This one belongs to Rex in his own right," he said quietly, "a recognition of his service past and present. The original," his fingers brushed Atlas's medallion again, "remains the connection to where it all began." Following the medallion presentation, each handler was invited to speak briefly about their K9 partner and the transition process. When my turn came, I found myself unexpectedly emotional as I tried to articulate what the journey had meant for Rex and me. 3 months ago, Rex stopped me from throwing away a box I didn't recognize. I began, the now familiar story feeling fresh as I shared it with this wider audience. What seemed like an ordinary cardboard container turned out to hold extraordinary connections to a K9 officer I never knew personally, but whose legacy lives on through Rex, to a history of service that refused to be discarded, and to a future neither of us could have anticipated. I described how Rex's protective instinct toward Atlas's belongings had catalyzed everything that followed. The discovery of his lineage, the revelation of Captain Mercer's continued investment in that bloodline, and the unexpected opportunity to continue meaningful service in a new capacity. What I've come to understand through this journey, I concluded, is that purpose doesn't end, it evolves. Rex protected that box because something in him recognized its significance, not just to his own history, but to his continuing mission. The same instinct that made him an exceptional police K9 now makes him an extraordinary search and rescue partner. The same loyalty that defined his service then defines it now, just in a new expression. As the formal ceremony concluded, the gathering transitioned to a more casual reception. I was approached by numerous attendees, many sharing their own stories of K9 partnerships and the profound bonds formed through years of working together. Several of the retired handlers were particularly moved by the connection between Atlas and Rex, seeing in it a validation of their own belief in the deeper meaning of their work with their K9 partners. "Dogs remember more than we give them credit for," said one veteran handler in his 70s, watching Rex maintain his dignified bearing amid the crowd. "Not just training, not just commands, but connections. The good ones carry something forward that we can't fully explain." As the reception continued, I noticed Rex's attention repeatedly drawn to the entrance of the training facility, his head lifting at each new arrival as if expecting someone specific. Captain Mercer noticed it too. "Waiting for someone, boy?" he asked, following Rex's gaze. The answer came a moment later as Jim Brennan entered, accompanied by a distinguished-looking older man I didn't recognize. Rex's reaction was immediate. He stood, his posture alert but welcoming, tail moving in a controlled wave of recognition. "That's remarkable," Captain Mercer murmured. "Rex has never met Walter Jenkins, but he's responding to him like a familiar figure." "Who is he?" I asked, watching as the elderly man approached with a measured gait that spoke of military precision maintained despite advancing years. Walter was the lead trainer for our K9 unit when it was first established in the 1970s, the captain explained. He personally selected and trained Atlas's grandfather for service. He retired years ago, but stays connected to the program. I invited him today specifically because of the bloodline connection. Walter Jenkins stopped a few feet from us, his weathered face creasing in a smile as he took in Rex's appearance. The SAR harness, Atlas's medallion, the collar with its engraved tag. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward Rex. At my nod, he approached, slowly, kneeling with surprising agility for a man of his years. Rex moved forward to meet him, nose working actively as he processed the scents associated with this new yet somehow familiar person. "Hello, young man," Jenkins said softly, his hands moving with practiced confidence to examine Rex's structure. Shoulders, back, hips, with the evaluative touch of someone who had assessed countless working dogs. "You've got the Baron bloodline in you. I'd recognize it anywhere. That head carriage, the way you stand, that's 3 generations of excellence right there." I glanced at Captain Mercer, who nodded confirmation. Baron was Atlas's grandfather, one of Walter's foundation dogs for our program. Jenkins continued his gentle assessment, moving from physical structure to temperament evaluation, speaking to Rex in the quiet, assured tone that experienced handlers use with working dogs. "You've got the focus too. That's the real inheritance, not just the physical blueprint, but the mind behind it, the drive, the discernment." After completing his examination, Jenkins stood, turning to me with evident approval. "This dog carries Forward the best of what we've been building in this program for nearly 50 years. Different application now with the SAR work, but the same essential quality. The capacity to form profound working partnerships while maintaining independent problem-solving abilities. He reached into his pocket and withdrew what appeared to be an old leather wallet. From it, he carefully extracted a faded photograph protected in plastic, a black and white image of a young handler with a German shepherd that could have been Rex's twin, standing before a much earlier version of the very training facility where we now gathered. This was Baron, Jenkins explained, holding the photo where both Rex and I could see it. First generation of our purpose-bred K9 program. Everything we've accomplished since began with him and 5 other Foundation dogs. When David told me about Rex protecting Atlas's box, about this connection across generations, I knew I needed to be here today. It completes a circle. The significance of this moment wasn't lost on anyone present. Here stood the living embodiments of a legacy stretching back nearly 5 decades, the original trainer who had established the Foundation, the captain who had carried it forward, and now Rex, representing not just his own service, but a continuation that spanned generations. As the reception began to wind down, Captain Mercer drew me aside. "There's one more thing I'd like to show you and Rex before you leave," he said. "Something I've been working on since we discovered the box." He led us to the main building, into an area that had once housed administrative offices, but had been repurposed in the facility's partial renovation. The door he unlocked revealed a room I hadn't seen during our previous visits, a meticulously designed heritage center documenting the department's K9 program from its inception to the present day. Display cases contained artifacts from each era, original training equipment, historic photographs, documents chronicling major cases and developments. One wall featured a timeline marking significant milestones, while another displayed portraits of every K9 officer who had served, arranged chronologically by graduation class. "The department approved this project years ago," Captain Mercer explained as we moved through the space, "but it remained conceptual until recently. Finding Atlas's box, seeing Rex's reaction to it, understanding the importance of tangible connections to legacy, it motivated me to finally bring this to fruition." At the center of the room stood a glass case containing a familiar item, a cardboard box identical to the one Rex had protected in my basement. Inside were carefully arranged artifacts representing each generation of the program's development: Baron's original leather lead, training manuals from the 1970s, commendation letters, and photographs documenting the evolution of techniques and equipment. "This is a replica of the box you found," the captain said, "designed as the centerpiece of our heritage display. The original contents remain with me, of course, but this representation allows every handler who comes through training to understand the foundations they're building upon." He led us to the most recent section of the timeline, where a photograph of Rex had been added, not in his police K9 gear, but wearing his SAR harness with Atlas's medallion clearly visible. Beside it hung a framed narrative, briefly recounting the story of the discovered box and its catalyst effect in establishing the transition program. "Your experience has already changed departmental policy," Captain Mercer explained. "The K9 unit now officially recognizes the value of transitioning retired police dogs to appropriate secondary service roles. What began with Rex protecting that box has created a pathway for dozens of K9 officers in the future, a way to honor their capabilities while acknowledging the physical realities of aging." As we prepared to leave, Walter Jenkins approached once more, this time carrying a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "A gift for Rex," he said, extending it toward me. "Something I've kept for many years, waiting for the right successor." Inside the package was a hand-tooled leather training pouch, the type used by handlers to carry rewards during work sessions. Though clearly vintage, It had been meticulously maintained, the leather supple and clean, despite its evident age. "Baron's reward pouch," Jenkins explained. "I've kept it as a reminder of where our program began. It seems fitting that it should now belong to a dog who represents where that legacy continues." The thoughtfulness of the gift, this connection to the very foundation of the program that had shaped Rex's life and service, left me momentarily speechless. Rex, however, responded with immediate recognition, sniffing the pouch thoroughly, before looking up at Jenkins with what could only be described as approval. "He knows what it is," Jenkins said with quiet certainty. "Not the specific history, perhaps, but its significance in the working relationship. These items carry meaning beyond their physical properties." As we drove home that evening, the setting, sun casting long shadows across the landscape, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had unfolded from that simple moment in my basement, Rex interceding as I attempted to discard what had appeared to be an ordinary cardboard box. What might have ended with the box in a landfill had instead blossomed into something profound, a renewal of purpose, a continuation of legacy, a deepening of understanding about the connections that bind us across time and circumstance. Rex dozed beside me in the passenger seat, Atlas's collar gleaming in the fading light, the new SR medallion joining the original on his harness. Tomorrow would bring more training, more preparation for the work that now defined this new chapter of his life. But tonight, in the quiet satisfaction of completion, we simply existed in the knowledge that purpose found its own path when given the opportunity to flourish. The following weekend, I finally returned to finish cleaning my flood-damaged basement. The task that had begun this journey now felt different, less a chore than an opportunity to rediscover what might be hidden among the seemingly mundane. Rex supervised from the stairs, no longer anxious about what I might discard, but watchful nonetheless, as if our shared experience had taught us both to look more carefully at what we might too easily dismiss. The empty box that had once contained Atlas's belongings now sat prominently on my bookshelf upstairs, no longer containing physical items, but filled instead with something more valuable, the understanding that legacy doesn't require tangible artifacts to maintain its power. It lives in the connections we forge, the service we render, the way we recognize and honor what came before us while creating our own path forward. As I sorted through the remaining flood-damaged items, I came across an old journal I'd kept during my first years as Rex's handler. Paging through entries documenting our early training challenges, breakthrough moments, and the gradual formation of our working partnership, I was struck by a note I'd written after our first successful tracking case. "Rex seems to understand the work at a level beyond his training, like he's tapping into something deeper, something almost inherited." Those words, written years before I'd known anything about his connection to Atlas, now seemed prescient. Rex had always carried something special within him, not just genetic traits, but a kind of inherited purpose, a continuation of service that had manifested most powerfully when he placed himself between me and that seemingly ordinary box. That evening we received our first call-out as a fully certified SAR team. A hiker reported missing in the national forest, last seen nearly 8 hours earlier, heading into a remote area with limited cell service. As I gathered our equipment, Rex stood by the door, already alert and focused, Atlas's collar and medallion catching the light as he moved with practiced efficiency into the truck. The search area was vast and challenging. Densely wooded terrain with steep ravines and numerous water features that complicated tracking efforts. 3 other K9 teams had already been deployed, each taking designated sectors according to the search coordinator's plan. Our assigned area included a network of seasonal creeks and drainages, a section selected specifically for Rex, given his demonstrated proficiency with watercross tracking during training. As we set out, the medallion and collar tag created a gentle rhythm with each stride, physical reminders of the legacy he carried into this work. The search continued through nightfall, headlamps and specialized equipment allowing us to maintain efforts despite the darkness. Rex worked methodically, systematically clearing each segment of our assigned sector with the focused precision that had defined his police work, now adapted to this different but equally vital mission. Shortly after midnight, as we navigated a particularly challenging ravine crossing, Rex's behavior suddenly changed. His head lifted sharply, body tensing with recognition. Without hesitation, he altered course, pulling confidently toward what appeared to be an impassable tangle of fallen trees and undergrowth. I trusted his judgment completely, following as he navigated the obstacle with determined purpose. On the other side, a steep embankment led down to a narrow stream, its banks muddy and treacherous in the limited illumination of my headlamp. Rex paused at the edge, assessing the descent, then proceeded with careful deliberation, choosing his path with the calculated precision that had always characterized his work. I followed, using tree roots and rocks for stability as we made our way down to the water's edge. There, partially concealed by overhanging vegetation, we found our missing hiker, a young woman who had slipped on the embankment, suffering a compound fracture that had left her unable to climb back to the trail. She had dragged herself to the water, where she'd remained for nearly 12 hours, alternating between periods of consciousness and shock-induced disorientation. As I radioed our position and began emergency first aid, Rex positioned himself protectively beside the injured woman, his body providing warmth while his alert posture communicated ongoing vigilance. The medallion and tag caught the beam of my headlamp as he shifted position, twin symbols of a legacy extending from Baron through Atlas to this moment. 3 generations of service manifested in this singular act of finding someone lost and bringing them home. When the extraction team arrived nearly an hour later, one of the paramedics paused after stabilizing the patient, his gaze moving from Rex to the distinctive medallion and tag he wore. "That's a special dog you got there," he said. "We were told this search might take days given the terrain. Half the coordinators thought we'd be recovering a body, not treating a survivor." "He comes from a long line of exceptional service." "Dogs," I replied, the phrase carrying deeper meaning than the paramedic could possibly understand. "Finding those who are lost is in his blood." As we made our way back to the command post in the early hours of the morning, Rex maintained the focused alertness that had characterized our entire search operation, even after hours of physically demanding work. The dog, who had once enforced the law as a police canine, had transformed seamlessly into a guardian who now located the vulnerable and guided help to their side. Captain Mercer was waiting when we returned, having monitored the operation remotely. Throughout the night, his expression conveyed both pride and a deeper understanding of what this successful mission represented. "Atlas's first wilderness search was a lost hiker too," he said quietly, as Rex accepted water and a well-deserved rest. "Different circumstances, different time, but the same essential mission, finding someone who couldn't find their way home." The symmetry of this connection, Rex's first major SAR deployment mirroring Atlas's, felt like the closing of a circle that had begun with that battered cardboard box in my basement. What Rex had protected so fiercely wasn't just physical mementos, but the continuation of purpose, the extension of service beyond expected boundaries. As dawn broke over the search area, casting the forest in gentle golden light, Rex and I started the drive home, both exhausted but carrying the profound satisfaction that comes from work aligned with deeper purpose. The medallion and tag caught the morning sun, creating brief flashes of light that seemed to punctuate the road ahead. The box that had nearly ended up in the trash had instead become a portal to understanding, a reminder that what appears ordinary might contain extraordinary connections. That what seems to be ending might be transforming into something new, and that the true measure of legacy isn't in physical artifacts, but in the continuation of purpose they inspire. Rex dozed beside me, Atlas's collar rising and falling with each breath, his body finally surrendering to the fatigue of the night's efforts. In that peaceful moment, I understood with perfect clarity what he had known instinctively when he placed himself between me and that box. That some connections transcend the obvious, that some purposes refuse to be discarded, and that the most meaningful legacies are those that find new expression through those who recognize their value. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.